Hello, I'm Carl Rowland with Sherline Products. In this video, we're going to go over the relationship between our slide nut and our anti-backlash nut on our mills in both the x-axis and y-axis, how to replace these parts if you have to, how to assemble these parts, and then once they're fully assembled, how to adjust your anti-backlash on both the y and on the x-axis. You've got the saddle nut inside, and you've got the anti-backlash nut right here. And as you turn the anti-backlash nut in, it's pulling directly against the saddle nut. So if the saddle nut comes loose, then with you can see it right there, as you turn it, your anti-backlash nut is starting to come out. And that's because you have a loose situation here. If the saddle nut is tight in here, then there's no way this guy can back out because it has the star nut holding this in place. So that's your y-axis. Your x-axis is the same thing, just in a different direction with your slide nut coming in. Your set screw for the y-axis is in the top of the mill saddle. The set screw for the x-axis is in the bottom of the mill saddle. So if you have the situation where it's come loose like this, then in order to get access to the set screw hole in the top of the saddle for your y-axis, you are going to have to remove your mill table. Okay, so you just start screwing it off. You can leave your gib right where it is. And you should be able to, once you get to a certain point, about when you see the set screw hole right here, is about when your slide screw has come out of the saddle. So you've got your anti-backlash nut for your x-axis and the slide screw. We'll just set this guy down here. This is your set screw for your y-axis. And if I hold it up here, let me take this out. Okay, it's loose right now, so you can see your anti-backlash nut moving. And that's because the slide nut inside is actually loose and moving. Okay, so what you want to do is push your saddle away from you, which moves the saddle nut up against the shoulder of the reamed hole in here. And then you want to start tightening the set screw. So you get it snug, and then you turn your y-axis screw. Now, if you tighten this too much, you'll actually crush the Y saddle nut, okay, and this won't turn at all. So what you want to do is, you can feel how nice and free that moves right now. Okay, you want to start tightening it down until it starts to bind a little bit, some resistance on your y-axis screw. So right there, it's still nice and free. Gonna go a little tighter, still free. Right there, it's getting hard. So what I'm gonna do is back it out a hair and then come up. Right there, I have some resistance, but it still moves nice and free. So right now, the saddle nut is locked in place. It's not going anywhere. And at this point, what I'll do is back off the button head screw on the star lock. And start screwing my anti-backlash nut back in. So once the anti-backlash nut is down all the way against the surface, it's up against the shoulder of the saddle, then what I want to do, you can either use a jeweler screwdriver, and if you have one of our Allen drivers with a nice plastic hammer, this acts as a nice small hammer. So we're going to adjust the anti-backlash nut. The y-axis is a left-hand thread, so you're going to turn the anti-backlash, this guy here, counterclockwise. That's loosening, this is tightening. Once you get it up against the shoulder, right here. Then what you want to do is using my Allen wrench here is just put the jeweler's screwdriver on one of the teeth on the star lock. Just give it a little tap, and that is now tightened up the anti-backlash against the slide nut, sandwiched it as tight as it can be. Then we're going to lock the button head screw in place on the star lock. And then we're going to check our motion. So right now, this guy has virtually no backlash. This is really nice. Okay, and it's moving nice and easy. Now, as I'm moving closer to the thrust collar right here, if it starts to get tighter as you're moving towards the thrust collar, then you're going to have to take your hand wheel off and adjust your thrust collar. There's one screw that holds it in place, and your thrust collar can go side to side to align itself better with the actual screw hole in the saddle. This guy's going nice and smooth. All right. So that's all the way up against the stop right there. So that's pretty sweet right there. So that guy's set right now. This is locked in place, this is locked in place. And as you can see, with them pushed against each other, unless one or the other comes loose, there's no way you'll ever get a gap between your anti-backlash nut and the mill saddle rather. Okay, so that's your Y-axis. In order to put this guy back together, your star lock is still there. Okay, your gib is still in place right here. So you should be able to put it over the gib and line it up with the dovetail there. Start working your way in. And when you get into it, you're just threading it back in place. And if I were to flip this over, you can see that the anti-backlash nut is now connected to the star nut, and I'm just threading myself in. Okay, so it's going to thread itself into the saddle nut inside. Once it's threaded, okay, now we can't move anywhere. So because it came all the way out, you're probably going to have to adjust your backlash. You can see where you've got there's a gap right here now, okay? So we have to adjust the backlash, the anti-backlash the same way on this. So first we unlock the button head screw. So the thread on this one is a right-hand thread, so you're going to move your anti-backlash nut clockwise in order to thread it all the way up against the shoulder. And right there's against the shoulder, and you can see the star nut is turning at the same time. It's faster to just turn the anti-backlash nut and then use the star nut for your fine adjust. So I want the anti-backlash going clockwise, which means I need to make the star lock move counterclockwise to take up the backlash. So I'm going to put my jeweler's screwdriver on one of the teeth. Just going to give it a little tap. Then I'm going to lock it in place with a button screw. That guy. That guy's locked in place. And you can actually leave this upside down right now to check your your backlash. So I have about one line of backlash. And then again with this one, you're going to go the full length of travel, and what you're most interested in is seeing if it starts to bind as it gets closer to your hand wheel on this axis. And this guy's moving nice and smooth. And that's all the way up to the hand wheel. So that guy's looking good. That's up to the hand wheel right there. That's all good. Again, you got about right there. You've got about one line of backlash, which is a thou. So that's pretty sweet. Once that's done, now you want to put your hard stop back in on the saddle, on the cross slide, and that way your table can't come off. And just snug on this is good. There you go, so that guy's in. So that takes care of your Y-axis. Okay, both the saddle nut and the lock. If your X-axis was coming out, you had a gap on your X-axis, then you would have to take your Y-axis off entirely to get to the axis hole in the bottom. So to do that, these are our standard 1 5/8 hand wheels. There's a set screw that comes into the hand wheel that holds the hand wheel onto the slide screw shaft. So what you're gonna have to do is break the set screw loose, take your hand wheel off. Some of them have a slight washer, some don't. If the washer's there, make sure you don't lose it and put it back on. What you do then is pull your saddle out of the thrust collar. Then you're taking your thrust collar off. Just one screw holds the thrust collar on. You're going to take your hard stop out of this end of the mill table. And then you can slide your entire Y-axis off of the machine. So that's your saddle off of the machine. Again, leave your gib where it is. And now for the X-axis, your set screw is right here for your X-axis. So if we had a gap because this had come loose, then this is where you'd want to tighten it up. If you're replacing the slide nut because it's worn out, then this is where you're going to break this free. Snap it free, get your slide nut out, put a new slide nut in, tighten it down, and again, when you tighten it down, you tighten until you start to feel resistance. Tighten a little bit more. If you have too much resistance, just back it off a little bit. But when you tighten it to the point where you start to feel resistance, that's when the set screw is bitten into the brass nut enough to keep it from moving. So you would do your adjustment on your anti-backlash up against the slide nut, check your travel all the way, and then you would put this guy back together. So to put it together, you've got your gib and your gib side and your dovetail to dovetail side. What I would do is align it on the gib side first and then move it onto your dovetail side. You might have to loosen your gib up a little bit to get it back together. If you have to loosen it, you've got your set screw right here that holds the gib lock in place. You break that loose. Move your gib out a little bit, snug it up, just snug. Then we put it back together. Hold your gib off to the side. Put a gib side first, okay? And now you've got some wobble there because your gib is so loose. So once you get it back on, then you loosen your lock on the lock, your set screw on the gib lock. You move your gib back in. You can hold the gib in place and move your saddle by hand back and forth. See how tight you've got it. If you go push it too far in, it's a tapered gib, it will lock your saddle up and it won't move, in which case you'll have to tap it from the back side to loosen it up a little bit. Right now, this guy feels nice. There's no wobble, that's good. I'm just gonna lock it in place. So the set screw's locked, the gib's locked. Now we're gonna put your Y-axis components back together. So the first thing you're gonna do is put your thrust collar back on, and it's just one screw that holds your thrust collar in place. So you put it in there so it's loose. Then you bring your saddle forward, get it on all the way up to the shoulder. Then you go snug on this. Okay, and actually I take it back. What you want to do is get your slide screw in as close to the saddle as possible to get your alignment here correct. So I'm just going to put an Allen wrench on here and just going to move my slide screw in. That looks good. So I'm almost all the way up against the anti-backlash nut. I'm going to flip my thrust collar up, put my screw adapter into it, and then I'm going to snug this up right there. And what I would do is give it a little wiggle while I'm tightening down this so it's in the middle. Tighten that guy up. Then we're going to put the hand wheel back on. On your screw end, your screw adapter end here, there's going to be a little indent in the screw adapter from the set screw and the hand wheel. What you want to do is pick a fresh surface to put your set screw into. So I'm going to turn it a little bit more, about 90 degrees. I'm going to pull the shoulder of the screw adapter up against the back of the thrust collar. I'm going to put my hand wheel on. The washer's still there. Put my hand wheel on. So there's two places you have backlash on this machine. One is between your anti-backlash and the saddle nut, and the other one is between the shoulder on the screw adapter and the hand wheel, because now the screw adapter and the hand wheel are sandwiching the thrust collar between those two. So if you have too much slop in here, then your backlash is actually between the shoulder of the screw adapter and the hand wheel. It's got nothing to do with your anti-backlash. So I want to pull the shoulder of the screw adapter up against the back of the thrust collar. I want to push my hand wheel onto it, and then between my finger and my thumb, I'm sandwiching these together. All right, we'll actually turn it this way. So I'm sandwiching these, forcing this way and this way, and then I'm just going to tighten my set screw. Get a good bite right there. Okay, and then check my backlash. Right now I have virtually no backlash, so that's pretty sweet. When we sell these, we guarantee it's 2 thou or less. On this, it's an inch machine, so 2 thou would be 2 lines on the dial. Right now, that guy's about as nice as it can be. So you have the sandwich of the anti-backlash against the saddle nut inside the mill saddle. You have the sandwich of the shoulder of the screw adapter and the hand wheel on the thrust collar. And those are your two main areas where you'll get backlash in the machine. So that guy's done there. We'll put the hard stop back in. So hard stops back in, and we're set to go. We have no backlash and nice movement. Almost no backlash and nice movement. So we're set in both the X and Y. Thank you.